As I mentioned, inside of our page component, we now need to go through these data fetching steps. First, we're going to create our server component. Okay, once again, we kind of already did that. We're going to mark that component as async. Let's do it right now. Next, we're going to reach into our database and fetch our data. In this case, we're going to write out a little bit of a query to make sure that we find the appropriate snippet using that ID out of our props object. So to get started on this part at the top, let's first import that DB object again. Second, we currently have our props as type any. That's not really best practice. Instead, we should try to create an interface to describe the structure of our props so that TypeScript understands what different properties we expect them to have. To do so, right above my component, I'll make a new interface called snippet show page props. Then in there, I'll say that I expect my props to have a params property that's going to contain an ID that is a string. Now I can use this new interface to correctly describe the structure of my props. Okay, next up, we need to reach into our database and fetch the appropriate snippet. So to reach into our database, the query we're going to use for that, and we will await db.snippet.find first. That's how we find some particular record out of our database. Now, when we call find first, we're going to put in an options object, and inside of here, we need to specify some information about what snippet we're trying to find. So we're going to try to find one based upon its ID. So to do so, we're going to pass in a where with a object, and inside this object, we're going to say try to find a snippet that has an ID equal to props.params.id. Now, as soon as I put that in, you'll notice that I get an error coming from ID right here. And if I mouse over that, I'm told type string is not assignable to type number. So this goes back to something I mentioned just a moment ago. When we go to a route inside of our browser, like snippets/1, it really appears to us that that little wildcard part of the route is a number. But again, Next treats it as a string, and we even annotated it as type string inside of our application as well. So the error that we're getting here is saying the IDs inside of our database are numbers. So if we want to find a snippet with a particular ID, we must search for it by a number. So we need to take this string that we have right here and just turn it into a number. We could do so very easily by calling the parseInt function. All right, so now on to step 4. We can render our data directly inside of this component or pass it into a child. Once again, I don't think we need to make a child component. I think we could just print out some information directly inside of here. But before we do, one other quick thing I want to point out, just a little gotcha. If I mouse over snippet right now and take a look at what TypeScript tells me about it, TypeScript says this is going to be an object that has an ID, title, and some code, or there's also the possibility that I fail to find a snippet with the appropriate ID, in which case snippet will be set to null. So we need to handle the case in which a user tries to view a snippet that doesn't actually exist inside of our application. To deal with that for right now, at the very top of my file, I'm going to import a function called notFound from next/navigation. And I bet you could guess what this function does. Anytime a user tries to find some data that doesn't actually exist, or anytime we just otherwise find it necessary, we can call a notFound function, which will automatically redirect the user to a page inside of our application that says, sorry, but the data you're looking for just doesn't exist. So down here, I'll say if we were not able to find a snippet, then return early and call notFound. Otherwise, let's continue on down. If we get down here, that means we were able to find a snippet. So let's just print out its title. I'll put in snippet.title, like so. All right, we've done a lot of work here, so time to test it out. Back inside the browser, I will see at snippets/1, I've got my title of function that adds numbers. Perfect. But what happens if we go to a snippet that doesn't actually exist? So if I go up to my path up here and I put a really long number in, I definitely do not have a snippet with that ID. So if I put that in, I'll end up being told, well, in this case, I got an error because this is not a valid number. Let me shorten that up a little bit. There we go. That's what we were looking for. So we got our 404 says, sorry, but you're looking for a snippet that just doesn't exist.